Welcome to the Schuby Show, where Carson Schubert interviews national and local sports personalities and more. Now, please be seated and get ready for some more never-ending nonsense with yours truly, Schuby.
This is the Schuby Show with yours truly, Carson Schubert. And today on the show, we are joined by the newly appointed South Dakota Coyote football voice, radio play-by-play, and the South Dakota Coyotes men's basketball play-by-play voice, and that is John Thayer. He also hosts the Yotecast. John, it's great to have you on today.
Well, it's great to chat with you as well. Thanks for having me.
John, first of all, just kind of want to hear from your perspective. Obviously, a new position, new positions for you, but still working for the Coyotes sports prop. Tell me a little bit about how excited you are for the new position.
Yeah, really excited. This has always been a goal for me, chasing in this business, trying to, be the football, men's basketball radio voice at a Division I school. And, at some point in your career, you start to wonder if the grind is worth it. And to be able to reach this and be at this level, I feel very fortunate and really excited for the opportunity. And it's at a great time. I mean, at the University of South Dakota, they've made a great transition into Division I here over the last several years and continue to improve facilities, and the teams just continue to get better. Women's basketball has been a tremendous program over the last several years. Men's basketball is growing and appears to be on the verge of being really successful, and football has been growing under Bob Nielsen and his staff the last several years, and I think they're all set up to continue to do well. So really fortunate, lucky to be in this position, and really excited for the opportunity.
Obviously, you enjoyed your time as the women's play-by-play voice for the Coyote women's basketball team, who had really good year this past year. Didn't get to accomplish anything in the NCAA tournament, but the last few years has been really special to watch them. So I'm sure there is definitely a little bit of a hard thing for you to have to try and get away from calling such a really good program, the women's basketball team.
Well, it's a tough thing to no longer do women's basketball. This program has been unbelievable, and I've been very fortunate to be, in the women's basketball side of it. I've seen arguably two of the greatest women's basketball players to ever come through the University of South Dakota, and recently graduated Kira Duffy and, of course, Nicole Seekamp a few years ago. Both have been tremendous in their careers, and, I had an opportunity to. My first year doing it was the first Division I NCAA tournament appearance for South Dakota women's basketball. And so I got that opportunity. And then, of course, in 2016, to get the opportunity to watch that team run through the WNIT and claim the championship was obviously tremendous as well. And just seeing that team this year go 30-2 and win the Summit League regular season and tournament title. It's the second time in 3 years that they've gone undefeated in the Summit League in the regular season, and fortunate to be around for that. And, to see this program get ranked for the first time at the Division I level, to knock off a top 25 ranked team for the first time at the Division I level. So I was fortunate to be around for a lot of milestones and a lot of neat things, and they're going to continue to grow. They graduated a handful of very talented players this last year, but they've got some real good players coming in the program, and Coach Don Plitzwhite and her staff have done a tremendous job building off of what Amy Williams was doing when I first started doing radio for women's basketball, and they've just continued to build it, and it's a program that has been built for sustained success, and we see that now year after year.
So now that we have told the audience what John is doing now, congratulations again, by the way, on the new jobs, John. Now let's go back to earlier in your career, maybe even into your childhood. When did you first get that niche or that love for sports just in general?
Yeah, it's that's one of my mom and aunt and grandmother's favorite stories. I grew up in Eustis, Nebraska. It's a town of about 400 people, and south central part of the state. And when you grow up in Nebraska, you are bound to be a Husker fan growing up. Is about all that Nebraska has, to offer for sports. So I grew up that way. My aunt worked at the training table at the University of Nebraska and fed the football team on game days for a number of years. And I used to listen to the radio even when I was at games. And there was something about the way that Kent Pavelka, who currently does men's basketball at Nebraska, used to do football and men's basketball. But there was something about the way that Kent Pavelka yelled touchdown, touchdown, touchdown that got me interested. And they tell the story that I was 8 years old when they asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up. And I told them at the time I wanted to be one of those guys that said he's to the 10 to the 5 touchdown. And so it's been that. And for whatever reason, it's, always been a dream and practice growing up, doing it to the PlayStation and some of that, and then got into college and just continued to love it. And here we are, years later, and still trying to make it happen and keep doing a good job at it.
Of course, growing up in Nebraska, as you said, I'm from Northwest Iowa, small, not quite as small as 400 people, but small town anyway, of less than 3,000 people, which maybe seems big to you, I don't know, but...
Well, you probably have shopping there and restaurants, like fast food restaurants. See, that's bigger than... We had to drive for all that. So that is, I laugh. A lot of people say they grew up in a small town, and they call about 2,000 people a small town, and I could show them a small town, that's for sure.
You probably would have given quite a bit to have a couple restaurants and a shopping area in town, I suppose.
Yeah, we had a good Mexican restaurant growing up in town, and that the gas station, a couple of gas stations, and that was pretty much it for food options.
As you said, at 8 years old already, you kind of knew what you wanted to do. You have been in Vermilion area, Yankton area since 2012. So a lot of people maybe don't know how you got there. You talked a little bit about your college experience, but you also worked for a radio station before coming to the Yankton Vermilion area. Is that right?
Yeah, I went to college at Doane. It's a NAI school of about 1,000. I think their enrollment was when I was there, just outside of Lincoln, Nebraska, and went there, got into doing the radio thing. Actually went there and played baseball for a year and realized my future was not going to be playing sports. So I just focused on doing radio, and I did that for 4 years there and had a great experience, worked with some good people. There was a guy by the name of Scott Rose. He worked out of Fairbury, Nebraska at a radio station, and he got me involved in helping him with some Doane football coverage and some high school coverage and things like that. And I learned a lot from him, and really he taught me a lot about preparation and how important that was, and got the opportunity, to do that for a couple of years. And then my first job out of college, I went to Holyoke, Colorado. It is just on the eastern plains of Colorado, just in from Nebraska, basically, and kind of where the interstate crosses over. It's about 25 miles south of there. Spent a year in Holyoke, and that was a radio station where when you get your first job out of college, I was willing to go anywhere just to get started. And I go to this radio station where there's me and a salesperson working. And so I did the sports coverage. I hosted a music show for 4 hours every day and did severe weather coverage, all that good stuff. So that was an experience. And then, as I was coming up on a year there, I got a phone call while I was in college. I'd helped out a guy by the name of Jason Danley, and at the time he ran the Victory Sports Network. Victory Sports Network was the best, without question, national coverage media of the NAIA. And I had done some stuff for him for free while I was in college. Well, he calls me as I'm in my first job out of college and said he might have an opportunity, but if I was happy with where I was at, he didn't want to rip me away from that or whatever. And so we talked, and a year after I moved to Holyoke, I left and moved to Grand Island, Nebraska, and that was our home base for the College Fans Sports Network. And what that was the Victory Sports Network was bought out by Bill Rasmussen, who's the founder of ESPN. and he had this idea that we were going to travel the country and cover NAIA sports. And we traveled the country in a van, pulling a trailer with all of our equipment. It was online, web-based video broadcast deal, and we did a game of the week. Sometimes we would do 2 games in a weekend. If to start the year, I think we were in Joliet, Illinois, at the University of St. Francis of Illinois on a Thursday night, and then packed up our stuff and drove overnight and into Friday to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where we had the University of Sioux Falls. At the time, they were NAIA, and had a game there, and we did that for a couple of years for both football and basketball. Got the chance to really drive all over the country and see a lot of it. We did games anywhere from Azusa, California, to Rome, Georgia, to Helena, Montana, to Williamsburg, Kentucky. So really got a chance to experience a lot of what the country has to offer, and did that for 2 years. And then unfortunately the company folded and left us all without jobs. And this was in late summer of that second year. And so I needed a job, and really, as you will learn in this business, the type of jobs that we're after typically are going to come open in the spring and early summer. Well, late summer's kind of late in the ball game for it. So I ended up getting a radio sales job and moved to Beatrice, Nebraska, where I worked in radio sales for about 7 months and was not doing any sports coverage. And after being there, for a few months, I had the opportunity to go to a brand new sports radio station in Lincoln, and they wanted me to do some on-air stuff and sales. And then as I got there and got started, it was tough. It was brand new sports station trying to move into the area, and it was challenging to get sales done. And the people I worked for didn't give me the opportunities on air that we had agreed upon and talked about. And so we ended up having kind of a falling out there. And at that point, I didn't know what I was going to do. I ended up doing some freelance stuff for radio stations out of York, Nebraska for a little bit, and really thought long and hard at that time about getting out of radio, and just kind of figuring at that point I'd done some neat things and had chased the dream, and some things just aren't meant to be, and threw out a couple more applications to some radio stations, and thought if those didn't go through, then that was probably going to be the end of the line for me. And I'll never forget, I was at a state softball tournament. I was in the middle of a broadcast, and I got phone calls and voicemails from both of the stations that I had applied to, and ended up going to interview at both of them, and then moved to Chadron, Nebraska for about 7 months before I ended up in the Yankton and Vermilion area, and had a great time, met a lot of great people in Chadron. Never planned to just be there for a short time, but things kind of lined up, and life took me into Yankton, where I worked at radio stations. And then after a year working there, had the opportunity to cover women's basketball for USD. And I think it was 2015 when we added sideline reporting for football, and just have been able to grow from there. So kind of crazy how it goes from, you're thinking about life, and maybe you could have fun just hanging out with friends and getting a different kind of job, watching sports and doing that instead of trying to chase the dream. And I was very fortunate that, radio stations called when they did before I made a decision that probably would change, what kind of conversation we would have today on live. But been very fortunate. So I've moved around a lot for a while. But again, you said it, 2012, came into the Yankton, Vermilion area, and haven't left. So it's worked out pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing how you can go from kind of being down on your career thinking maybe it's not going to happen, and then all of a sudden you get those phone calls, you get contacted, and things change really quickly. It's pretty amazing how that works.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I was to the point where it was a really tough time. And, anytime you're trying to do something great and you're trying to chase a dream, this type of job, anytime a job opening comes open to this type of job, there are hundreds of people that will apply for it. Everybody wants to do it. Everybody thinks they can do it. And it's very hard to get into a lot of times. And so you just at some point have to, we've seen a lot of people change their career paths, and it's worked out for the good for a lot of people. And just at some point the stars aligned and the signs pointed to don't give up just yet. And, very, very fortunate that those signs came about. Otherwise, who knows what I'd be doing today. Who knows? I thought about the time just getting some random job and seeing where it goes from there. But I didn't, and here we are.
Absolutely. And I suppose that just kind of those humble beginnings, as you said, in a small town, Eustis, Nebraska, and then kind of working at some other radio stations, it probably makes you really think and be thankful for where you are now compared to where you were and kind of where you got your start.
Well, it does, because, I grew up in a town that was very supportive of a lot of people, but, you're not going to live in that town unless you're a teacher or a farmer, that comes back and wants to take over the family farm or whatever it may be. And, you leave a small town like that with big dreams and big goals, and you just wonder, the kid who comes from a small town that didn't go to one of the most prominent broadcast schools, can you get to where you're going? And it takes a lot. I always felt like I learned hard work and good work ethic from that town, and jobs that I had while I was in high school working on farms and things of that nature. And I think that's a lot of the credit to sticking with it and keep trying to get better, because there's, when you don't go to a big journalism school or anything like that, you really have to find your own ways to continue to get better. And that's what I tried to do. And, fortunate to meet the right people along the way as well. That obviously always helps you out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely been the case in what I've seen through the beginnings of my career, too, is the people that not only could they be the people that hire you someday, but they could also turn out to be good friends and really good to learn from them, as I'm sure you have had many people you've worked alongside with that you've learned from, and I've had the privilege of learning from you just from our interactions that we've had together. So it's definitely respect that and just kind of learn along the way. As much as this business is a competitive field, it's always good to be able to take a little bit of a learning curve from some of these guys that have made it in the business as well.
Well, I think that's one thing that always held me back, and I wish maybe it was for the better, but sometimes I look back and think I should have been more aggressive when talking to some of these other broadcasters or reaching out to them. When I was in college, I was always nervous about reaching out to broadcasters who had been doing higher level stuff for a long time, because I didn't want to be a bother to them. And the more that I've grown in this business, the more I've realized you're not a bother to them at all. They carry busy schedules, but the majority of the guys in this business and gals in this business will help anybody out. And I had that, with Matt Coatney. He's the voice of the Husker women's basketball team at the University of Nebraska, and has been that for a long time. And I sent him some stuff when I was in college, and he responded to me, and we've stayed in touch ever since then. And this past year, we went out to a tournament in Las Vegas, and Nebraska was there. They were on our flight, so I had a chance to chat with Matt Coatney on the before we got on the plane and out in Las Vegas. And it was the second time that I've broadcast the same game that he was doing, because women's basketball played at Nebraska. I think my second year maybe doing radio. So we had that opportunity, and very surreal to sit just down the table doing a broadcast on the other side as somebody that you idolized and really tried to learn a lot from. And I think that's the moment where you really appreciate the hard work and see it all paid off and some of that. And so really, really cool moments for me. There's no question. And I just appreciate people, like him. And I mentioned Scott Rose earlier, and he was a guy who's no longer in radio, but certainly taught me a lot along the way. And so that's something that, everybody in this business, as you go through college and get out of college, should do, is find people who are in the business. And not everybody's going to respond, but don't be hesitant to send out stuff, because you never know where the networking is going to take you. And that's just so important in this business. Get to know people, and you never know when that's when that's going to help out along the way, because I always think a broadcasting profession is a lot like coaching, where it's a small world, a lot smaller than it appears. And it's amazing how many people you can get to know around the country.
Speaking of people you've got to know, the voice of Coyote men's basketball and Coyote football for the last 8 years before you have now taken the reins was Joe Van Gore, and you were able to work alongside him for many of those years, and just kind of want to hear what your thoughts are on, first of all, Joe's career and how, now that he's kind of taking a step back from the Coyote side of things, but kind of going towards more local events, sporting events, and then also just maybe a story or two that you have that is, I guess, on-air appropriate with Joe Van Gore.
Yeah, Joe's been in this business for a very long time. He's worked for all three radio groups in Yankton. At one point, he was, I think for a year or two, was the voice of South Dakota State. He had done South Dakota one other time before his most recent kind of stretch run at it. And he's known, he did Mount Marty College in Yankton for a handful of years as well, and just has been in it for a long time. So you get the opportunity to work around somebody like that who's been in the business for a long time, and you can kind of see just how professional, that people carry themselves and some of that. So very fortunate to work around Joe and get the opportunity. I think when we started doing the sidelines stuff, it was not a position that we had here, but I kind of talked to him a little bit about it and kind of talked him into doing it, said I'd do it for free. Said, you never know if there's an injury or anything that I can see on the field and just help provide something for you guys. It doesn't hurt anything. I'm not going to get paid for it, but let's do it if you want to add to it. And, he was open-minded enough to open the door to that a little bit, and it led to an actual position eventually that I did get paid for, and I felt like we always worked fairly well together throughout the years with football, and he kind of at times would use it as a crutch. If there's something where you never know where you're going to get your view blocked at, especially in the Dakota Dome, where the near sideline from the broadcast booths on the east side kind of run in a way where you can get blocked by the team and the overhang of the bleachers. And he knew when to ask, and I think he always had the trust that for the most part I was going to be in position to see it. I just always felt like I did a good job getting from one side of the field to the other and making sure that we could see everything going on. And so really learned a lot from Joe and how he prepared and did some different things. And we, drove a lot of miles together and some of that as well. You wanted a story, so here's one for you. It was, I don't remember the year. In USD men, it was in the Dome still. So it was pre-2016. And Joe's getting ready to do the game, and he's in his pregame show, and they were going to play, I believe it was Iowa Wesleyan. And Iowa Wesleyan, NAI school, came out wearing, I believe it was dark purple uniforms with dark gray numbers. Just an absolute horrendous situation for a broadcaster because you can't see. You put dark on dark, it's tough to see. And Joe's frustrated with it as he's in his pregame show. And I'm standing close to the table there, and Joe had his headset on, and so he never heard them announce that they were about to start the national anthem. And just as everyone quieted down for the national anthem, I think he was talking to his board op, communicating there. And I'm standing right behind him, and I hear Joe, loudly say, "I can't even read their freaking numbers." And it was quiet in the Dome, and so everybody on the scores table, I see everybody's head turned towards Joe. And that's when Joe realized that it had been quiet, and, about everybody in the building heard him yelling about Iowa Wesleyan's numbers, and I thought that was pretty good because, Joe always disliked the Coyote Chrome uniforms as well because you have red jerseys and these silverish chrome numbers that are hard to read, especially from a ways away. And so that while they look neat close up, from a ways away where we do the broadcast from and things like that, they're challenging to read. And so that was one that I always reminded him about for that. And here's another one, not radio, but Joe does a lot of PA, especially for amateur baseball, and he would know I'd tell this story because we give him crap about it a lot. But he's doing PA at the state amateur baseball tournament in Mitchell, which in South Dakota is a really big thing, and there's a lot of people, and they do bingo during half innings. And so Joe will announce, get your bingo cards. We'll start it in the third inning, whatever it may be. So one of the games Joe's reading, I'm getting ready to do radio for a game, and Joe's doing PA, and he's reading bingo numbers. And he gets to one, and he announces I 8. Says it again, I 8. And I'm thinking, I 8? How is that possible? And I look down just in time to see Joe put his head down in his hands, shake his head, and then he opens the mic and he says, correction, B1. B1. So I have often reminded him since then that I 8 is not a bingo possibility. And, he likes to give it right back, so it's fun. But there's a couple for you.
That's awesome. That's a couple really good classic Joe Van Gore stories. And, of course, we wish him nothing but the best in his future endeavors as well. John, as you had mentioned, working in the Dome, doing basketball games before the Sanford Coyote Sports Center was put together, what has the Sanford Coyote Sports Center not only brought to you as a broadcaster, but to the fans of USD? Because it seems like it's a state-of-the-art facility from my perspective anyway, and it's just been really cool to experience the games that I've been able to experience there, and I really can't think of going to a game at the Dome that isn't a football game right now.
Well, and you're right. I mean, what the Sanford Coyote Sports Center brought was just an atmosphere. I mean, it was amazing, absolutely amazing during the WNIT run-in that the women's basketball team had to watch the crowds grow every single game. And you go from, maybe, I don't know what it was, if it was 1,000 or 1,500 fans for the first round game, to by the time you have game 3 or 4, you've got over 4,000 fans in the building. And then there was over 7,000 people in the Dakota Dome for the WNIT championship. And I thought it was a pretty neat atmosphere. But it's just such a wide open building, and they had to work so hard with bleachers on the ends of the court to try to make it feel like a basketball facility. And I know opposing teams struggled at times shooting because the depth perception from behind the basket to the wall is a lot different than what you get in most arenas. And so when they built the new arena, it did a number of things. Number one, for the fans, it brought an atmosphere. Now you can have 2,500, 2,000 to 3,000 fans in there, and it feels like the place is just jam-packed just because of the way that the sound bounces around, and just makes it feel like a big-time arena, big-time event. So I thought that was a really neat thing. It's given the athletes just an unbelievable place to play basketball in and call home, and it's flashy, and it's sexy, and it's neat. It's just a different animal than the Dome was for basketball. And then with the arena and all that was built, better training facilities and the better weight room and all of that just is so important for not only basketball players but volleyball players, and it's so important for the football team and everybody else to have that kind of facility, because the reality is recruiting only goes so far in terms of what the coaches do and team success and things like that. Like, athletes in today's world want facilities. They want top-notch facilities so that they know that they're going to be taken care of. They're going to get their bodies to recover, things like that. And we've seen that at USD, and they're winning recruiting battles because of the facilities that they continue to increase in. So it's been awesome to see the Sanford Coyote Sports Center, and you're a lot closer to the video boards, where in basketball, when you run something on the video board to get the crowd fired up, I mean, you could just see it a lot easier and a lot better, and it put fans right there on the court, and you feel like they're right on top of you, and it's just such a great facility, and they've done a great job in so many different aspects of making it a great facility. The Dome will have a special place in the heart for a lot of people. Volleyball was once played in the middle of that floor, had basketball, and now it is. It's football, it's track, it's practice for tennis sometimes on the inside when the turf's not completely down. Soccer practices in there, softball practices in there. I mean, you name it, they probably practice in that building, and still is. And it looks neat now as they continue to renovate the west side for football and some of that. But they continue to do great things there, and it's just nice to have an actual basketball arena where you just feel like, especially when you get a big crowd for games, you can just feel the energy, and pretty amazing. You can see the athletes just build off of that energy and appreciate it, and you can see it a lot more now than you could in the Dome.
As your time continues in the Yankton-Vermilion area, I'm sure you've made a lot of relationships, a lot of friends, and just acquaintances during your time in the area. What has been some of the great lessons that you've taken away from just being in this area, and maybe just what's been so great about being in South Dakota, and more specifically in the Yankton-Vermilion area?
Yeah, it's amazing. We grow up and you start looking at life plans and where you're going to be someday, some of that stuff. I never really considered living in the state of South Dakota, and it was nothing against the state of South Dakota. I just had no ties there. We went on a family vacation to the Black Hills, western side of the state once upon a time, and that was about it. And then I moved here, and you realize in South Dakota, there's a lot of really neat things in this area. When you look at the river that runs through both Yankton and Vermilion and the right nearby, the lakes in the area, I think it's great access. You look at Vermilion, great access to Sioux City or Sioux Falls. And I think what's amazing is I love the town of Vermilion and the way that it embraces the University of South Dakota. And it's just such a college town. And, those businesses just rely so much on the athlete's success because that brings people to town. And so they support it, and they do great with, whether it's advertising type of things or just being great hosts when people come in from out of town. And obviously with football and basketball, you get some of these athletes' families coming from Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, wherever it may be. They come in to the weekend, and you just want to treat them well and show them a good time. And I think Vermilion's done really, really good with that. And, anytime that we've seen the women's basketball team go to the NCAA tournament a couple of times, it's been amazing to see the community come out for a send-off and just how much they appreciate it. And, I've gotten feedback from people who listen on the radio because they can't be at games or whatever. And you just know how much they support and appreciate it. And so I think that's been really, really neat for me to see, is just how the community of Vermilion embraces the University of South Dakota, and USD embraces them as well, because it takes both sides to make a great partnership and continue to have both of them grow. And I think they've leaned on each other very, very nicely. So I think that's been one of the great things that I've been able to see since I started, with women's basketball in 2013.
Moving into more of the play-by-play side of things, I've asked you this question, I think, before, but maybe for the listening audience, who are some of your favorite play-by-play guys? I guess we'll also add the local area, but national area as well. Give maybe 2 or 3, just depending on how many you have in your head, I guess. But who are some of your favorite play-by-play guys, local or national?
Yeah, on a national scale, Kevin Harlan, I think, is the best in the business. He does Monday Night Football for Westwood One for radio. I've always tried to model what I do around him. I don't want to sound like Kevin Harlan, but if I can be as descriptive as Kevin Harlan, I've got a chance to be good in this business, and I know that. And so he's somebody that I've always enjoyed listening to. I just think it's incredible what he brings. I'm a big Kansas City Chiefs fan, and so I love listening to Mitch Holthus. I think Mitch does a great job. He's pretty good at description. He brings abundance of energy to a broadcast. And I've seen some videos that somebody's recorded of him in the press box while he's doing the radio call. And it's amazing to watch him jump around and see how excited that he gets for that team. And I always thought if I could bring his energy with Kevin Harlan's description, then that was going to be about the perfect match. But I really like those two guys. Listening to them, I think Kevin Kugler does a really, really great job. He does Sunday Night Football on Westwood One, does some TV stuff as well for the Big Ten Network. And he lives in Omaha, Nebraska, and he's a guy who got the opportunity straight out of, Omaha. Back when he was doing UNO, they had football. And so he goes from a Division II gig to being a national broadcaster on a national radio network. And I've always admired what he has done. And so I think, those three guys, as far as radio, three that I really, really enjoy listening to. More locally in kind of that area, one of the guys that I like listening to for high school sports is Jerry Pleshy. He's a USD graduate out of Sioux Falls. I've always thought that he does a tremendous job, and I listen to a lot of local broadcasters because I love sitting on a Friday night and flipping through the radio to see what games are on. So I always think it's a neat deal to flip through, and you get to hear a whole different variety of styles for broadcasts and the way that people bring it. And I always feel like no matter what level you get to, you can probably hear something from somebody else's broadcast that you can incorporate into yours, or that maybe triggers something that you kind of like to do and you change and tweak a little bit. So I always think listening locally, I like doing that to high school basketball, high school football games, and just hearing what's going on. And obviously local colleges as well. I'm always interested in what Mount Marty's doing because I live in Yankton, and interested in some of the other schools in the area as well. Just a lot of local ties to small colleges in the area. And I think, another local one, I think Tyler Merriam does a tremendous job at South Dakota State. And I've had the chance to get to know him quite a bit and listen to him quite a bit. And so I think he does a really good job. And Jay Elson's about as good as it gets for TV play-by-play out of Midco Sports Network out of Sioux Falls, and had the chance to really get to know him over the years as well. And really think highly of those guys that I've been fortunate to work with.
Yeah, backtracking to Kevin Harlan, as you mentioned, just a phenomenal, as you said, description of so many things. Of course, the man running drunk on the field. Of course, nobody can forget that call. Just brilliant call of that, and just a lot of really good energy that he brings to a broadcast as well. And as you mentioned, some of the local guys, all very good class acts during the broadcast and out of the broadcast, so they do a really good job as well. But it's really cool to be able to take different parts of what people do as broadcasters and kind of make it all into one different thing, combine them all into whatever you want to do with your broadcast. But so John, let's go into a little bit about what you've been doing during this pandemic. Obviously, it's a unprecedented time right now for everybody, really. Maybe some people are fortunate enough to have a pretty normal schedule during this time, but many of us have had our schedules affected quite a bit during this time in some way or another. And what have you been doing to pass the free time that you've been able to have? And have you tried anything new, new recipes that you've tried, or new hobbies? What have you been up to?
Well, I was a victim of the pandemic when it came to jobs, because a couple of part-time jobs that I have been doing, I was furloughed from because of all the challenging times. And so I've had a lot of time on my hands. I've played a lot of golf. I've walked a lot playing golf, which is good because then I'm actually exercising, and it's something that I'm enjoying doing as well. But my golf game is not getting any better. I just play a lot of bad golf instead of get better at it. So I do a lot of that, play a lot with the dog. I take her on 3 or 4 walks a day sometimes because she's got a ton of energy, probably too much at times, but that's the way that goes. Currently been working on a deck staining project and have been redoing that. So that's been a long process because, of course, I made the decision to start it. The weather was looking great. And then when I did that a couple of weeks ago, all of a sudden we had rain chance. And so you don't want to be out there, messing with that stuff if you can't dry before the rain. And just a lot of that stuff came up. So that's been kind of a ongoing project here over the last couple of weeks. And I'm just about done. On kind of next week, I think, is be able to get the finishing touches to it. As far as recipe, I've tried some new recipes. I have taken a liking to Pinterest lately, and I never really got into Pinterest much, but I also have now found that it is a unique tool to get about any interest that you have, different ideas. And so I started a couple of nights looking through recipes, and one of my favorites that I tried, and I've got to try it again, is a French toast omelet. And it was tremendous. And you just able to start making the omelet, kind of eggs in it, whatever. You put a couple of pieces of bread on it. Before you know it, you got bread and this omelet that it's surrounded by. And it's really, really good. Also tried some, what did we try? We had some chicken cordon bleu stuffed chicken breasts type of thing. Done stuffed pork chops with kind of a jalapeno popper stuffed pork chop. And so a couple of them, they've all turned out pretty good. I've learned a little bit about trying to stuff pork chops, things like that. Took them out of the refrigerator a little bit too early, and so it made it a challenge to cut a pocket into to put the filling in. But those are a couple of things that I've tried, and I'm definitely looking for some more. I think here soon I'm going to get a wood pellet grill and maybe try kind of going down the route of smoking some different things and see how that goes. So learning a lot, doing as far as cooking is concerned. So I've been able to do some of that. Yeah, outside of that, just projects around the house. My wife certainly has not been shy of increasing the honey-do list, and so we've been able to get some different things done. The garage has been cleaned up. The shed's been cleaned up. Couple of rooms that I've neglected with extra clothes, excess clothes, that's been cleaned up. And so we're getting through some projects. So there's definitely some silver lining to it, but I know it's been a challenge for many, many people who have either lost jobs or, haven't been paid in a while, and just businesses that have lost business as well. So just a wild, wild time, and we try to make the most of it as best we can. And for me, golf has pretty much got me through it a little bit because I go out and play probably 3 or 4 times a week, and I'll walk, sometimes 3 or 4 times in the week. And so I'm getting exercise, I'm doing something I enjoy, and that at least has been able to give me a little bit of hope and positiveness, because this has been a challenge with this whole pandemic.
Yeah, it definitely has for many people. Definitely going to have to get that French toast omelet recipe from you, though. That sounds really good. But one thing that we tried, beer can chicken, and I know that's probably not new to some people, but we've never tried it, and it was really good. I have to say, it was really good. So that might be something that you might want to have to try, but definitely, I know for sure I'm going to have to try that French toast omelet.
I figure with some of the stuff, when I'm trying to recipe where it's a stuffed pork chop or chicken or whatever, at the end of the day, you can't mess those up too badly, because even if the filling doesn't work right or whatever, you're going to end up with a chicken breast or a pork chop or whatever. So as long as you don't overcook them. But the French toast omelet, I'm telling you go search that, you'll find it. It is something that takes a little bit of work. I almost messed it up when I did it, but I kind of broke the omelet a little bit. But when you flip the 2 pieces of French toast on top of each other, it really doesn't matter in the end anyways. But that's definitely a good one. I've only tried it once, really enjoyed it. And the time that I tried it, of course, I was home alone. And my wife has wanted me to make it, since then. And so we need to do that at some point. And it's worth a try, no doubt. And if you mess it up too badly, you'll end up with scrambled eggs and a couple of pieces of soggy bread. So it's not too bad.
There you go. And John, we didn't talk too much about one of your other duties that you've had for this past year, which is hosting the Yotecast. Just briefly talk a little bit about that and how you've enjoyed starting to do something a little bit off the cuff a little bit compared to what your normal duties are.
Yeah, that's been really a neat thing, and it's got a pretty positive response from Coyote fans, and some episodes get listened to a lot, some not nearly as many, but we've continued to press on. It's been a weekly deal, and pretty much every week we've had athletics director David Herbster on the podcast, and then we usually have a guest or two that joins as well that I do interviews with and then put it all together. And our guests have ranged from people in the athletic administration office to athletes and coaches and just a whole bunch of different people. And one of the most listened to podcasts that we did was a lot of fun. I was interviewing the women's basketball team. Some were in person, some were over the phone after they had won the Summit League tournament title. And, shortly after I got done with the last interview, within 10 minutes of doing the last interview, we found out there would be no NCAA tournament. And so that was a challenge, but we put that together a couple of weeks later. And we kind of held on to it when people needed something sports and something positive. And that was our most listened to podcast by far this year. But it's been really a unique deal. They came to me last summer with the idea. It's something we've talked about before, but this time, everybody was ready to make it happen and figure out a way. And so we were able to put it together, and it's been really neat to not only just produce a podcast for USD, but to be able to dive into some of the background and stories that people have with the University of South Dakota. And so that's been a lot of fun, and I've learned a little bit along the way, and it's been, it takes a lot of people to be able to pull that off. The Sports Information Office, mostly with Brittany Smith and Brian Betcher, those two have been tremendous in kicking around ideas and help getting interviews lined up. And then it takes Kelsey and Jaron to help promote it and some of that stuff. And obviously the support from Travis Lee and Jessica Patrick with Coyote Sports Properties. So it's been a lot of fun. And we have wrapped up year number 1, taking a little break here during the summer. And we look forward to having it back for year 2. Starting in August, and who knows what direction we'll take it this next year, but it's another thing that we do to stay busy and keep the fans connected, and I know that at least for year 1 they've really appreciated.
Yeah, and even as a broadcaster, being able to call volleyball and football and basketball throughout the year last year, I know it was good to kind of hear from some of the players before going into games and kind of what their experiences are, and kind of add that to a broadcast as well. It's always good to have the fans be able to hear from what the players are doing off the court, because they see what they're doing on the court through broadcast and stuff, but they don't necessarily get to hear or see what these athletes are doing in their spare time. So it's good to kind of hear that and what they experienced growing up and all that stuff too. John, it's been a lot of fun having you on the podcast today. Again, John is the new voice of South Dakota football and South Dakota men's basketball, and he is the host of the Yotecast. John, it's been a pleasure. I want to thank you again for coming on the Schuby Show today.
Well, thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it, and stay in touch with everything that you're doing and keep doing it, because it's a grind in this business, and I know that you're finding that out, but keep after it. And tell everybody, set your goals high and chase it and keep going, and don't give up on it, because you never know. You could end up a success story and get that opportunity, and it's all worth it when you get the phone call and ask of your interest in doing a job that you've always dreamed of. So thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.
And that is going to do it for the Schuby Show this week. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Schuby Show. We hope you mildly enjoyed yourself with more never-ending nonsense with yours truly. For more content, go to the website, theschubyshow.com. Get the show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. We'll see you next time.